great. Thank you. Let me share my screen with you guys. I'll share the screen first, then I'll get the material up here. So, alrighty, guys. So, thank y'all so much for joining us tonight. I'm super excited to come and chat with you about this topic. And what I wanted to do tonight is really share with you guys kind of we've had a couple of there's a couple of different tools that people know and sometimes use in searching for their job, trying to do their career transition, but kind of wanted to do a survey of different kinds of tools and approaches, systems, and give you guys more of a toolbox look. So we'll dive into a few of things in a little more detail, but we'll kind of just talk about a variety of things that might be helpful. And so, certainly share with me your thoughts on that. I got to rearrange my screen here just a second so I can kind of see everything. Sorry. Okay. All right. Let's get going. So there's really, I think, certainly kind of two approaches to career transition that people tend to use. One is to be sort of laser focused on exactly what you're looking for. And the other is sometimes, to kind of spray and pray, right? So this is, sort of the old school way of like, I'm going to do my resume. I'm going to scan for every single possible job on the job board that seems to fit it. I'm going to throw my resume into it. This is sort of represented on the left. I'm going to apply to as many jobs as possible. I'm going to wait and hope and pray for an interview request. I'm going to go to the interview. Wait to see if I get the job, etc. And then, I'm going to keep rinse, lather, and repeat that. The other is, really more proactive and a little more targeted. And this is especially used, an approach that's especially used as you go up in the stack in career, where you're really trying to figure out exactly what you want. And especially people that are going for sort of the executive hidden job market tend to use that approach. In my career, I have tended to use the approach to the right pretty much all the time. Even when I was at Dell, I was very, very specific. I most of the time have gone to exactly the kind of work that I want to do. So I'm a fan of that model. But in both of them, it's more complicated today than ever before. Whatever you had to communicate has gotten more complex over time. And so that's kind of what we want to look at. Like in a perfect world, like I really think that one of the things that excites me the most about being a Christian and the concept of going to heaven is that you would be at a place where your communication would be frictionless. I could tell you something and you would know exactly what I meant. We wouldn't misunderstand each other. It would be a piece of cake. But in this world, that is not the case at all. It is certainly not the case in the job market, right? So, you and your message, these are some of the components we have to deal with in our pursuit. We have to say, well, me and my message, like who I am and what I'm looking for. And then there's this company, and this company has their needs and what they're looking for. And then we have to somehow effectively communicate that. And we have to find that we are a good fit for each other. And then really, this isn't either one of our normal jobs, right? Like whatever we're doing normally is not this. So, we have all kinds of other distractions, and this is kind of a distraction from our normal work. And so it's easy for this to fall by the wayside or to get delayed, or all those kinds of things happen in the friction of trying to do a career search. And so, you got to think of those things. And nowadays, there's, more gates than ever that get into that with systems like ATS systems. Like before, you might have had to get through a recruiter to get the hiring manager. Now you have to get through the ATS to get to the recruiter to get to the hiring manager. So like all of these things make this way more complex than it may have been in years past. And so we want to kind of explore some ways to use some technology against the technology that kind of gets in our way. Use it effectively, let's put it that way. So I think that there's sort of four major things to kind of think about. Like, how can I'm going to have to tune my brand. I'm going to have to, maybe do company and career research. I'm going to have to, overcome these communication barriers. And I'm going to have to stay focused with my execution of trying to find work. And so we kind of wanted to look at different systems that can help you guys with that. So I want to kind of take a map view of this. And so I think there's sort of three major big things that not all of us necessarily need to do, just depends on where we are. But because I'm doing kind of a survey, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the overarching map, and then we're going to deep dive a couple of times, okay? So, first off, we have to assess and decide, right? I mean, a lot of times I'm out of work and I'm just trying to find the same work, but sometimes I'm trying to maybe make a pivot, or even if I am trying to find work, I might want to make some changes. Like there were things I didn't like about my last company or my last job. I want to divide and conquer. Let's see if we can get rid of some of that stuff I didn't like and get more of what I would like. And so there's this work at the beginning of doing some assessment work, even if it's just to kind of dust off the resume. Like, what are the more powerful words to use now, right? So that's sort of the first phase. And then, how do I plan and execute my job search itself? Like what are the pieces I need to have in my plan and in my hand as I go? And then how do I go through this communication process, whether it's networking or applying, all the things you have to do as you're actually trying to get to the job. So this is sort of the overarching map of survey of tools that I've looked for you guys. So let's take a look at the assess and decide. So I think there's sort of, a couple of different things here. And some of these are probably very familiar with you, but I want to kind of hit a few deep dives on these. So, I think one of the things is to look for is really when you're doing your job search, it is future centric, right? I mean, we are going to look at our past experience, but I think a lot of times people think it's all about the past experience on their resume, but really you should be looking at like, where am I really wanting to go? And then how do I adjust the message for that, right? So like, I like this picture on the right here that, branding is really about, the value you have, but the perception of that, as well as the awareness of that. And it's kind of where those things come together. And so if we know anything about anything from the political landscape going on today, is things can be one thing, but they can be messaged another thing. I'm not saying that we should do that in bad ways, of course, but we have things maybe that we've had that are weaknesses, but we have strengths. Like, how can we message that well? So, we might want to spend some time looking at a criteria of, what is it that I'm really wanting to do in my future direction before we just hop in and throw resumes out, right? And so I want to share a couple of thoughts with you on that. Again, are we just continuing this job search? Are we pivoting? If I am pivoting, do I need to look at different career profiles? And I'll show y'all in one of the tools where just in going and looking at some career profiles and things, I found that the way I was positioning myself, I could just shift slightly and actually make it be way better for me. And I'll point that out as we go. I might want to look at my history. I do need to kind of update my resume. Maybe I do a SWOT analysis. If you guys don't know what that is, that's assessing strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. So you can do that kind of from a personal standpoint. Maybe your industry is a dying industry. Your career is going to be going the way of automation, right? So that's a threat, right? And so what else do I need to do to pivot out of that, for instance? Or maybe, I'm doing well, but there's an opportunity to learn one or two things and be in a higher paying job, right? So that's how opportunities could come in. And then your own strengths and weaknesses, right? Doing a gap analysis, like if I want to be here at this level and my experience is really here at this level, what kind of thing in this next job could help me close the gap? So now we're being more strategic about our next career rather than just finding the next thing. Sometimes we're in a job crunch, we need to do that, but to the extent that you can take another step in the direction, that's always a good thing. So sometimes if you're really trying to pivot, or if you're new in the career field, some skills assessment, competencies assessments can be really good for you. Most of you probably heard of DISC or Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders. Have all of y'all heard of that before? Those are different other kinds of skill assessments that you can do. I want to kind of bring up one that you may or may not have heard of. It's a little newer. It's a little bit different focused, which is the Enneagram. How many of you have heard of an Enneagram before? Yeah? Any of you taken it? Okay. I think this is a really good one, and I'm gonna share a little bit about this when we get there, because I think it has some specific value that I don't see in the others that can help you in targeting the next step, which is really getting to your current messaging. Like all of these things are kind of assessing where you are to then go and say, well, what is my current messaging? And then the next step will be, what do I need to do to augment that messaging, right? So, a lot of times people will go off and do a job search and they'll send their resume out, but they never go and look at what they're saying in LinkedIn or what they're saying in social media, right? So the reality is recruiters nowadays will go look at your social media. So you have to kind of get some congruency there. And if the messaging is leading to something completely different than what you're saying on your resume, then there's going to be a disconnect, right? So you kind of got to dust that off. Look at the other things in your online presence. If you have a web page or blogs, things like that. Looking at your testimonials, they might even be good, but are they really the most relevant ones, right? Do you need more updated testimonies, right? Things that are more relevant to where you are today. And then are there any perceptions, right? That either are perceptions from people about your weaknesses or perceptions about areas of growth you need to take that you need to deal with, or are there perceptions that are strengths that you need to make sure you leverage, right? And so I think all of this is sort of in the way of kind of getting to that assessment and then making sure that the things you're doing out in the world layer into the brand you want that's future centric, not just the stuff that you've done in the past. So does that make sense to all of you guys? Just as sort of an overview statement before I continue and dive into some of these. Okay. Let's dive into just a couple of things here. So, and some of these will start to get some tools or some ideas, right? So later on, you're going to see when you're doing your messaging, you're going to start to really be looking for a specific role, a specific job, what your target companies are. And it helps to kind of have some criteria that you're looking for. And so I want to share just a couple of coaching criteria that I share with people sometimes that I like. I like this one that's, terms need to be less than ROI plus FV plus L plus PD. And so, you're going to give your time and your energy and your resources and your money and your sanity to something for the next year or 3 years or whatever you're going to do it for. So there better be good return on investment. But more importantly, there better be good future value, right? And that's something that sometimes people don't think about, but it's much more strategic. Like at the end of the day, when that happens, let me get someone else who's coming in and joining us. Will I get the future value from this next role, right? Will I be better positioned in the future, right? So a lot of times we don't think 3 or 4 years out into the future and say, well, where will I be when this thing happens? Will this really position me where I want to be next? It's like thinking 2 steps ahead. So make sure you think of that one. How will this impact your lifestyle? And how will this impact your personal development, right? Like, will you grow? Will you become a bigger person there? So I think that that's a really great formula, and I really like that one. And then this other one are some factors, right? And I like this one too because, this is sort of like what makes us feel like we are moving forward. Like if you're going to go into some company or some position, but you feel like you don't have any control or autonomy, you're probably not going to like it that much, right? If you don't feel like the environment is caring and supportive, like it's a hostile work environment, maybe that's not important to you, but it's important to most people, right? So like, I like these because these are good criteria to say, like, as I start to look at these different companies or different positions, what's really important to me? So for instance, if you took the factors and you kind of scaled them out for yourself, 1 through 10, how important are these things to me? Well, then you would have something to look at as you started to evaluate companies and cultures of companies. Does that make sense? There might be some other criteria that are important to you. What ones might be? Like geography, like I don't want to move, or maybe I want to work remote, right? So you can create your own sort of criteria, and it's a good thing to kind of create a little bit of a criteria independent of the companies and the work positions. What is it that I'm really looking for me? And a lot of times, again, people just hop into the resume, send it off, and don't really take this step. And then they're in the next thing and they hate it kind of as much as they've, maybe hated their last job or whatever. So I think that that's a really good step that sometimes we overlook. Any questions on that before we move on? Y'all are easy. Y'all are awesome.
I think it's really good, Todd. Really good stuff. I think we don't put enough. And if I'm speaking for anybody, please raise your hand or cut me off because I can speak. But um, I think we don't put a lot of energy or effort when we're looking for a job into a lot of these things. I think taking a step back and looking at it from an outsider's perspective and really kind of thinking through each one of these is excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. And I love your math equation. It's the first time I've ever seen
Isn't
something
that
like
cool?
that.
I love that one
Yeah,
too.
that's really cool. So that's super cool.
The only thing bad about it is I can never quite remember it without going and looking at it, so I keep it really handy. But anyhow, but it's a great thing to think through. Well, let me hop forward. So, if you were really making a pivot, if you were thinking differently, or even if you were just kind of trying to figure out like what other companies, you're going to have to do some research. And so the Department of Labor has a couple of different really good websites that I found that can help you really in a variety of different ways. They have all kinds of career profiles, assessments, skill assessments that are free that you can download. So if you really want to see like what skills you have and what jobs those layer into, these assessment tools and stuff help. And they also have links to training resources, all kinds of other things. I didn't even have time to do a detailed survey of everything there, but there is a ton of resources at Career One Stop and One T Online. So, and especially in that space of exploring different kinds of careers, different kinds of skills, different kinds of industries, and more importantly, kind of the words that might be used. So you might look up, marketing, like this is like marketing managers, and you'll see that I like this. That you'll see that there's sort of other job titles. It could be called account supervisor, brand manager, business development director, commercial line manager, marketing development executive. You'll see finally product manager, which is sort of my background, right? So, sometimes it's a little hard to find the thing that you might bring to it, but like when you hunt it around, you find it's kind of part of this, larger group. But like if you go to a different industry, they may not call it product manager. They may call it something different. So that's a key to like if I'm going to shift to a different industry, I may have to find that title is something different in that industry than what it is in mine. So when I was at Dell, for instance, I was in product management most of my time. Part of that time, I ran our digital camera business. And when I ran our digital camera business, in most consumer electronic spaces, that's just called being a buyer. But we called it product management. So like, again, just depending on what industry you're in, those words are different. So this is a kind of a cool resource to look that kind of stuff up. Okay, so just a little bit on the Enneagram. If you've never looked at this, the Enneagram is not so much of a personality test or a strength finder test. It really helps you see your underlying motivations and sort of what's behind that. And there's a couple of things that I think are really excellent about it for a job search. Number one, I think it tells you a tremendous amount more about yourself and about the kinds of people that you work well with. Some sort of areas that are a little bit more complicated for you, but it also grades sort of up and down, like you're like the worst of a person in a particular grouping, and then their best, like what they are at their best. And so sometimes, like for instance, you'll see in my style here that I can be forceful or maybe even come across as cynical or confrontational with people. That's sort of what can happen in my weakness. And sometimes you hear those kinds of things, like we hear the kinds of things that we are, from people in different contexts sometimes. And so we're like, okay, well, that's a problem I need to work on. But the underlying motivation of that is that, like in my case, eights are protectors, right? They're key protectors. And what I'm usually doing is trying to protect people. I'm trying to protect people. I'm trying to protect the project, the product we're working on. And so the motivation isn't necessarily problematic. Sometimes my intensity can be problematic, right? So Sometimes even when we're thinking, when we look at our things and we look at our sort of strengths and weaknesses, you might find that you look at some of your weaknesses and you put a word to them. And then when you look at your Enneagram, you go, oh yeah, but that's really about this. And I can sort of cast things like at my best of myself. I know I need to work those things that can be problematic about myself, but they really come out of a pretty good place. And I've got plenty of really great examples too. And that sort of draws a line. Like sometimes we get stuck thinking of ourselves in one way. And when you kind of think through this a little bit more with this survey, I think you start to find ways where all of the good parts of that come out too. Even if you've got some examples where you were, like in my case, where maybe I'm a little overbearing or come across condescending or forceful. Um, it's usually because I'm trying to help everybody move forward. I'm trying to protect them, and I'm trying to protect the mission, right? So, and so when you see that, you can make sure you're treating yourself well, and talking about the best of yourself. So I think it's a great way to kind of look at your resume and your strengths and weaknesses and make sure really a resume and your marketing plan is kind of always about marketing the best of yourself. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of see where those things are the best of yourself. And so I think this can be kind of helpful, as well as just being a great way to learn about yourself and what you care about. So anyway, if you haven't taken that, I would highly recommend it. It's really inexpensive to take the test, like $12. You get a ton of data to learn about yourself. So enough said on that. Let's hop into getting down into making the deliverables that make all of this work. Your marketing plan, your resume. How can we do those things better and tune those things, and how do we use those things? So one thing is, how many of you have actually built yourself like a personal marketing plan as opposed to just a resume? Have y'all used that kind of model before? Anybody? So when you first look at this, like first time I saw one of these, I thought, oh, this is really just kind of another form of a resume. but it's really designed to be built to give to someone who's going to be more of a referrer for you. Like if you're going to go to a friend or a networking person, you might want to give them your resume, but giving them this piece is almost a little more helpful. What you're really defining is, what is the unique selling proposition that you have? What are you really trying to accomplish? Like, what kind of target companies are you interested in? What kind of target markets are you interested in? What are you looking to do in this next role? So like, again, once you've done all that work that we talked about in the first part, and you go like, hey, I'm really pivoting from, like for me, maybe I'm pivoting from working on my own. I want to go back into the workforce again. And so that's a story, right? I've been doing this for a couple of years, but I've decided to go back to corporate America, and I'm looking to go work, but I don't really just want to go back and work in the tech industry. I might, but I'm really still looking to do product management stuff, but I'm really interested in some other industries. Maybe pivoting that to the travel industry, maybe pivoting that to educational industry, because I love to be a part of education. And so I'm therefore looking at these companies. And that tells this person not just like, hey, I'm looking for work, can you help me? But it gives them a sense of how they can help you, right? And that's the point of this, is for you to get clear about what you're trying to do so that you can communicate what you're trying to do to other people who can help you along your marketing. So before you get to networking with a lot of people, having a piece like this that is easy to leave with them, that reminds them of your target companies, reminds them of your geographic location preferences that you want to work in, reminds them of your expertise, gives them something where if they're going to think, I need to maybe introduce Todd to, so-and-so, that gives them something to, when they call them, they can say, hey, I got this guy and here's what he's trying to do and here's some of his experience, would you like me to connect you? And so it gives them a bridge to what you're trying to do. There's templates that you can find on this online. I'm going to try to find one to put on the website. I wasn't able to get it ready for today, but I think this is a really great tool for having in your hands when you go network with people. And it really forces you to think about your target companies and your target industries, right? That your resume doesn't make you think about. Your resume just says, I did these things. This is really more about like, where am I trying to go work? What is the areas I'm looking for? And so you got to spend some time on that. Now, I think that gets you into having to do some company research. And when John was here last week, he talked about using like the library and being able to use the A to Z database. There's other resources at the library. I was just looking at some other ones, like if you need it to do some training and different tech stuff, lynda.com. They've got Learning Express. This was just at the Pflugerville Library, but most libraries have a variety of different online databases and tools that you can use. They're free, and so that's one way to go. Another great resource for this, I think, is Glassdoor. And I really, really like them. So, I mean, in one sense, they're, a lot of people use them as a job search board, which they are. But when you create a profile here, they have a lot of really great company research. So, like, here's the case in point. I started with looking at the job description I was looking for, and you'll see over here in the top left it says 184,758. Once I actually tuned the language of that, it went from 136 to 184. So just like spending some time with that, I found that if I take my actual real experience and I shift it to this, rather than calling myself marketing director or things like that, it's actually going to be better for me if I don't, especially within the industries I was looking for. So that's just a case in point where just spending a little bit of time researching the titles, playing with it a little to the left and right, looking at it, go like, hey, if I just change my positioning on my resume and what I'm saying I am, still really the same level of experience, then I could actually be aiming myself in a much more lucrative grouping set with people. That's just an example. It also will suggest companies for you. So when you're trying to build your target companies, it'll ask you like, okay, here's sort of 5 companies that would be dream companies. And it'll start to recommend other companies similar to that for you. So suddenly you're going, oh, yeah, I like that one. I like that one. But you can also just discover like top companies. And then you might, like for instance, there's a thing about the top companies that are great to work for. And so you go down that list and you go, oh, yeah, I love that company. You might not even know why you think you resonate with it, but it's a starting point, and you can kind of say, oh yeah, I want to add that company. I want to kind of follow that company. So it's just a kind of great way to kind of free form and out of your own personal affinity, find different companies that might be target companies. You can spend a little more time and say yes or no, but and it'll give you a detailed research on them. The other thing it'll do is it'll let you compare companies. So for instance, you can say, well, I've worked at Dell. I kind of know what Dell's like. Maybe I want to work at Apple. Well, I can kind of lay those side by side and really look at a whole series of different characteristics as reported by people that work there, about working at that company, and kind of get a better sense of like, is that really still one I want to work for or not? So I really like those particular things, but you can also find companies and job searches there. And so definitely would recommend, that's a great place to do sort of company research, salary research, job title research, and really start to tune in some of what you're aiming at. I have used this before, and I highly recommend it. There's a variety of different systems that you can get on that will kind of help you automate looking at your resume and things like that. I'm going to recommend 2 for you. Work It Daily is really more of an online coaching system. They will provide training for you on different aspects of resume, interview, etc. But they have a way in which you can work with coaches directly. They will review your resume. They will send you a video back telling you things you might want to tweak. They'll review any cover letter, every cover letter, right? They will review your LinkedIn profile and give you feedback on things to change and stuff on that. And it's like $29 a month. And fabulous. They're really great at the service. So highly recommend it for sort of having your coaching. Like if you were working with a one-on-one career coach, you're talking about spending, $3,000, $2,500, $4,000 for somebody to work with you for like 3 months one time. This is a way better deal. If you're looking for an executive level, they have a group that's more focused on the executive level. There's a bunch of other resources that they provide, but like if you go out, you can see everything that's provided in the program. But I used them for a while, thought they were amazing, highly recommend them. And you can turn it off whenever you don't need it anymore, so it's easy to get in and out. The other one that's really awesome to use is jobscan.co. And even though I think the Work at Daily group is great, JobScan solves a different kind of problem. How many of you have heard of JobScan before? Any of you? Okay. So I'll just kind of cut through this. What's really amazing about this is that they're really helping you learn how to get through the ATS system. And what you do is you cut and paste, your resume with a particular job description. So this is one, I went back to Dell. I found a job description I totally am qualified for. I have 30 years of Dell experience on my resume, right? So there's all kinds of use of the Dell word. I'm totally in the same space. This is literally in services, like I was in services. It's literally product management, a lot of the same technologies. You would think I would score really high on this, right? So I scanned it, 29%. So, I mean, like, that's pretty impressive that I'm that far off on something I think that, I should be really pretty close to on the get-go. And then what they'll do is they'll give you like the keywords that you're missing. And what's interesting about this, like every single one of these keywords that I'm missing, I don't have to be. Like I literally qualify for all of them from the work I've done before. That I'm just not, I just didn't represent it that way on my resume. Now, sometimes this is helping you go like, man, maybe this isn't the job I want, right? Like I don't really want to do that. But in my case, like literally there's really no reason I'm not using every single one of these words somewhere. Probably my weakest one is sales training, because most of what I worked in didn't involve a tremendous amount of sales training. But even in that, we did some of that. So, but like every single other one should be totally in there, and yet I just represented my job differently. So it's really about, making sure you're connecting, because unfortunately, the thing that's going to put it in front of the recruiter, and then for the recruiter to put it in front of someone else, is whether or not this system spits it out as one of the top ranking things. So if you don't actually tune for that, you're probably never even being looked at by a recruiter who's getting hundreds of resumes to look at, who's going to reduce that down to a handful before they give it to the hiring manager. So, I love this system because, it helps you actually just very quickly do that. It tells you a bunch of other things. I did pretty good on some. There's some others that I need to tweak. And some were really simple. Like for instance, my file name type, I just had it a little longer than some systems will take. Well, that's easily fixable, right? So, my date formatting, they didn't consider standard, so I should fix that, right? So just lots of little things that can all ding you that this is helping you really rapidly see. You can do like 5 of these for free on the free deal. It's a little pricey, but again, if it's going to help you get there in 3 months rather than 6 months or whatever, then, I think it's probably worth it. I've heard people that have spent a lot more time using this system say that they thought that it was worth it if you could afford it, right? To go ahead and bite the bullet on it. The other thing is it can do is it can automatically look at your LinkedIn profile for the same kinds of feeds too. So that's another kind of really cool system for being able to help you tune your resume and make sure it's right and connecting well. Okay, questions about any of that? Is that all good? Does that make sense to you guys? Or all right, so let's talk about, now we're down to the communicating. We've got our deliverables, we got a marketing plan, we got our resume, we've learned how to tune it. Now we've got to do this ongoing communication to try to work with people. And this is where, we were going to do networking and applying and all those kinds of things. So first off, maybe in networking, you need to find people's emails at their work. So there's a little system called emailhunter.co. And you can do a certain number of searches. I think it's like 50 a month for free. It doesn't necessarily always have everybody's email address in it, but what it does tell you, even if it doesn't have someone's email address at a particular company, it's pretty good, but it'll tell you what the most common pattern is at the company. And when you look through the list, you might see some alternate patterns too. So even if you kind of have to guess from there, you probably can get a pretty good fit for, how to maybe reach out to that person. So that's maybe, a pretty good system for that. The The other thing I think is a really good, this isn't so much of a system in and of itself, although it's using some systems, is to create a pivot message. Because fundamentally, in any kind of transition, you're pivoting. And so, the way to think about this is a lot of times we have a lot of contacts on our LinkedIn page. Maybe we have a lot of people on our email list, and it's tedious maybe to go through them and curate them, etc. But unfortunately, in our social media, we have a lot of shallow connections sometimes. What you want to think about is, how do I get really good connections? Like, who's really relevant for me to talk to? Who can I really engage with? Who can help me with what I'm trying to do locally, or whatever local means for me, right? And so, how can I write a message? And it can be sort of so I take all the things I've learned and I write a message that says, here's what I'm pivoting to, and here's what I'm looking for. So it's kind of like taking your marketing plan and putting it into a message, maybe a little bit higher level than the marketing plan, which could be attached or given later on. And then going through, like, what if you just spent a day, like, once you wrote this message, and then you went through LinkedIn, right? Went through your email list and sent it to everybody who was really relevant and who you really had a real relationship with. And it may be customized it a little bit. Like, this is sort of your boilerplate, but maybe you have a paragraph that, says, hey, I hope your kids are great, or whatever about them that you could really connect that's personal. So it doesn't just seem like a form letter, right? And yeah, that seems tedious, but you're just getting out and you're sending this pivot message to lots and lots of people in a really customized and personal way. And really, it's kind of important to make it, positive, so that people don't, say, well, poor Todd, right? Like, you want it to be like, hey, I'm wanting to catch up with you and I really could use your help. And how can I help you? Just make it really positive and upbeat. So then you can use like your mailing list and LinkedIn to facilitate this. You're probably only going to get about 10% of the people replying. I read some articles on people that use this approach. It's about 10% that really reach out, but most of the time, those people, the 10% that really reach out and really help, are pretty powerful in your job search. So that's kind of a strategy that you could play with on that. Now I want to show you really quickly, and I'm not going to go into it because it doesn't even really fully exist, but anybody who's applied on any of these systems knows that most of them send you over to like the company's board, and you have to create a login and go through their process, and then you got to go to the next board and go through the login and go through the process. It's a total pain in the rear, right? There's a group that's building a system called Occupy, and you can actually go see a demo of it. And what they're going to be able to do when it really ships is, like, you'll see that in this space here on this demo, they're doing Indeed on one side, they're doing Occupy on the other side, and in 4 minutes and 14 seconds, they're basically still working on the first thing on Indeed, and they've already shipped it to 212 people, job roles, over here on the Occupy. Now, for me, that kind of seems like it's that sort of spray and pray model to some degree. But if you want to send it to lots of people, that was definitely going to make it easier than the current approaches. So that's kind of an interesting one to watch. In the meantime, what can you do to make it easier? Here's a little tool I use that's called Breevy. And I'm going to just demo this for you guys real quick. Although you probably use text expanders on your phones, but we don't typically have them on our computers, right? Breevy is basically a text expander on your computer. And so, you got to type in your name on every application. You got to type in your address. You got to type in your city. You got to type in your phone number. Whoops. You got to type in your LinkedIn profile. You got to type in maybe some other profiles. You got to type in your website address. So like just being able to like go through them quickly, because you can text expand all of these things that are just asked over and over and over again, is just helpful. So that's a really fun little tool that's just can be really helpful when you're filling out all of these things over and over and over again. And in a lot of other ways, right? So that's kind of a fun little tool. Look that one up. You basically just create any expansion you want, and it can go really well. Now, I use some tools. In fact, actually, let's go back over here to my thing. One of the things I text expand is I have a calendar thing when I want to set up meetings with people, and I can send them a thing that says, my online calendar is up to date. Why don't you set up a meeting on Zoom? Just click here. So, how many of y'all have used online scheduling calendars? Okay, so most of the time, a lot of the people that you're going to maybe go to your companies aren't probably going to schedule with you that way, but a lot of your informal interviews and stuff will schedule with you that way, and it helps you prevent having duplicate meetings, block out scheduling. It makes the whole process of setting those meetings up dramatically easier. I use Acuity Scheduling as my main way. It's a little expensive. Meeting Bird is a free one that you can use. But what I found was a tool that I thought was really interesting. I'm going to kind of demo it for you a little bit because it actually adds a lot of different things in one place. And it's this little tool called MixMax. And what it does, you have to be willing to use it through Gmail, which is the only part I don't like, because I'd rather not do that. But what it does is lets you do sort of calendar, email templates. You can kind of schedule when you send things. You can really put a dynamic schedule into it, and that's the part that I think is really one of the coolest parts. Is being able to put this dynamic scheduling in there. But you can also do reminders, which means it's kind of a simple way to do follow-up management, right? Because, and this is one of the things that's hard to find a good tool for. I just haven't found a really great tool for managing follow-up. So when you send a message, you forget that you wanted to get back with that person in 3 days. If they hadn't gotten back with you and say, hey, I hadn't heard from you. Can we still do that meeting? It's just easy for you to forget and not come back to it. And so what this does is it lets you kind of manage that. And so when you set up your emails, you can kind of see who's opened it, where they've opened it, who hasn't opened something. So you might want to say, I need to get back with them. There's just a variety of things that tells you about the interaction. So you can see that through their live portal, but even when you're on Google in your feed, you can see when this gets opened and stuff. So let me show you kind of how this works, because I think it's pretty cool the way it works. So first off, don't you love it when things decide not to work again when you're trying to demo them? Hang tight a second here for me for a minute. Oh, hold it. That's why. No. I need to put my glasses on too so I can see this. Well, we might have to blow this off if I can't fix this real quick. What time are we at, Kevin? We still have a few minutes? We do. Let me see if I can fix this real quick.
About 3 or 4 or 5 minutes.
I'm in Google, yes. Give me 1 sec, guys. So annoying. No, so it should be working. Maybe I just wasn't logged in. That's the problem, I think. I thought it was. Sorry about that. Okay. So, so yeah, now let's come back to Gmail here. Okay. All right. Got it. So what it does is it adds into your deal the ability to set up templates and things. So for instance, once you take that pivot message, you can make a template out of it. And you can say, well, I want to request an informal interview. And so boom, the whole thing comes here. And then I want to ask Kevin to meet with me. And notice how it automatically changed it to Kevin's name. I'm going to just write in Whole Foods here. And Whole Foods here. And then I'm going to take where it says insert calendar, and I'm going to just delete that, but I'm going to say, okay, let's set a meeting. Now this is the coolest part right here. I'm going to share availability, and what it does is instead of having a static availability like most of mine do, I can come in here and say, well, I want to offer to meet, I can see what's already on my calendar, and I can say I want to meet here, or here, or here, or here. And then I say insert times, and boom, it puts a box right in there that Kevin can just go, yeah, let's do that time right there, right? And as you can tell, I've already got a thing where they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I've actually already attached my resume or my marketing plan here. And then I just send that, and boom, Kevin gets that right away. And I can, he can reply and set up that meeting, the whole 9 yards with me. And then what you can see is even right inside your Google Calendar or in your Gmail account, and it's probably, I don't know if it's things that it should be actually showing me the number of people. There it is. Had to just refresh. So like this is showing me like how many times somebody opened that message. So I can see that this is one I sent to myself yesterday and replied to. And so I can see that, somebody's replied to that and connect it. And, if I don't see that, then I know that I need to kind of reach out to them again. The other thing I actually didn't show you on that, but when I sent that, I could have also set a reminder to remind me, if there was no reply or if it wasn't read or regardless, to get back with them 3 days later or whatever. And I could just set that time, and now it's going to remind me. So it's also creating a little follow-up, set it up. So this is a really great tool for sort of that follow-up, set it up kind of model. And there's a certain amount you can do with it for free. For $9 a month, you can do everything I'm showing you here, right? So pretty powerful. Acuity is like $20 and doesn't have that dynamic nature and is way more complicated. Calendly, same thing. So for $9, you get sort of, email tracking. You get the ability to kind of do reminders, the ability to insert a calendar and have people set that up and manage your calendar. I was pretty impressed with it. So I just started playing with it, but I'm actually going to be using it because I think it's actually a really handy tool for being able to, kind of make your communications happen faster. And when you're trying to have lots of communication, that's an important thing to do. So that's definitely one of my favorites for sort of managing the communication flow that I have found, because I think the follow-up is really difficult in these kinds of things. And I've been looking for a pretty decent tool. That most follow-up tools are really overwhelming and big. And this one can do that if you're enterprise and all that kind of stuff. But the without getting into all that, it's available. So I'm going to play with it some more, but I really kind of liked this one a fair amount. So hopefully that's kind of a little helpful to y'all. Let's come back to the presentation. I think that's actually it. Yep. that's the last of the tools that I really look for. So, so anyway, that's kind of the survey of tools. Let me close this off. Hopefully some of those were helpful to you guys and gave you all some new things to think about that could help y'all, manage this better and get through it better. This is Todd Boyum, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Fellowship Career Network. We meet every Monday evening from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and we hope you'll join us soon. To register and receive the Zoom link in your email, simply go to fellowshipcareernetwork.com today.